Today I'm going to be talking about Photoshop, and I'm doing just some basic Photoshop skills that people who are more new to Photoshop and are trying to figure everything out, this is the lecture for you. There may be bits and pieces that you may not know, but most of it, if you've been doing Photoshop for any length of time, you're going to know this stuff. But it's important to sometimes be reminded of it. And when I was going through, I'm like, oh yeah, that's how you do that. So it was good for me to go through and write everything out because I was being reminded of things that perhaps I had forgotten. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to my, I have a PowerPoint, and hang on, I can't do it that way. Hang on, back to Zoom. Okay, so I am going to share my screen and get right into my PowerPoint and into Photoshop. And I am sharing this screen. Okay, can you all see it? Is it all there? Okay.
Yes.
Very good. So today, these are just going to be, oh, and if you want to use chat, let me get back to this. Anyways, I'm trying to figure out how to make chat happen because I didn't have it open. Over here. Okay. Oh well, we'll just figure it out. If you have a question, turn off your microphone or turn your microphone on and interject. I'm not turning off anyone's microphone. You have control of your own microphone. And so if you have a question, just unmute yourself and let me know. Today I'm going to be talking about 10 basic things in Photoshop that I think everyone should be familiar with. And so I'm hoping that that will help you out. I was talking with Bob before the meeting, and he was saying that Photoshop is really intimidating. And it is, because there's so many steps to just do one thing until it becomes second nature, and then you're like, oh, that's so easy. But when you're like, where do I get the pictures from, and how does this work, and all those sorts of things, it can be a real struggle. And so it's best to learn one Photoshop skill at a time and work on that, find tutorials on it, watch them, practice through them, and so that you learn where that tool is, how to do the things that you're wanting to do for that particular thing. And the more you practice on it, when I was learning Photoshop, it was like 7 or 8 years ago, every day I was practicing. Every day I was watching a tutorial to learn something else so that I would keep my mind familiar with it and I wasn't getting lost in the process. And so just don't get overwhelmed, just keep trying, because people do learn it and we're all intelligent, and so we all can learn it. My first number one thing is about non-destructive editing. Photoshop is made to do non-destructive editing, and you may be that perfect person that knows exactly what you want to do and you can do it all in one layer and you're perfectly happy, but I am not that person, because there's always something later on that I want to go back and change, try different this, maybe take this back out or put it back in. And so I like having all those layers there for me to be able to undo what I did. And Photoshop gives you all those layers so you can do that. And so to me, it's foolish not to take advantage of that. Every edit or group of edits should be done on a different layer. If you're editing skin, that can be on a layer. Then maybe you're editing the background, that's a different layer. Maybe you're doing landscape and there's trash that you want to get rid of, or just all those little different things. Label your layers and keep track of them, and do your different edits on different layers so that okay, oh, where was that? I wanted to fix that. You can see down your list of layers where it is, instead of having to click on each one and figure it out. That's not fun. To make a new layer, I'll show you when we're in Photoshop. Excuse me? Oh. For spot healing, you want to do it on a different layer. You would click sample all layers, and then you can do it on a layer all by itself. And the same for the healing brush and clone stamp. All those things can be done on their own blank layer on top of the initial picture. So number one, non-destructive. Number two, blend modes. People get really confused with blend modes, and it's.
Kathy, can I make a quick suggestion?
It's the way each. Sure.
All right, back to the layers. If you use a separate layer, to use a blank layer versus a copy of the layer below, which is what I was always doing in the past.
Oh yes.
Your file really,
yes, I do that.
Constantly make a copy of the layer below it, because it's just like, okay, I love all of this, now I want to add on top of it. Try to resist doing that, or you'll make your files humongous.
Yes, yes, I learned that early on, and that is what I teach. That you use a blank layer to do your edits on. Saves a lot of space. Yes. Blend modes change the way each layer reacts with the layers below it. And you should kind of play around with them and get familiar with what they do. They're very helpful in working with textures, adding contrast, and when you're working with composites, as you get more advanced, they help bring the scenes together. So the most common ones for me personally are multiply, screen, overlay, and soft light. And I will show you what they do in a minute. We're going to go to Photoshop in a second here. And the top group of them interact with the darker pixels. The second interact with the lighter pixels. And then the third grouping is kind of a mixture of what they do with the light and dark pixels. It was their miscellaneous list, I guess. And then the bottom ones are more color and light and dark related exclusively. So I'm gonna open up Photoshop, which I was gonna do beforehand, but I didn't. Okay. And there we go. Okay, we're going to start with this picture, or not. I will open. Where'd it go? Okay. Okay. So this is I took all the edits off of this picture, so this is just like out of camera raw. But it's just a real basic wedding portrait sort of picture.
I can't see your screen, Kathy.
Oh, you can. Oh, you can't?
I cannot. I see the blending mode. I see your PowerPoint. Is that what you're showing?
No. Okay. Let me. How do I fix that? I should be able to. If I'm on the screen, I should be sharing.
You have two monitors?
I do. Do I have to put it over here?
I think you have to unshare the the Photoshop or the?
Okay, I'm going to stop
the-
sharing. Let me do a new share.
Yeah.
Now I'll do this one. Okay, we'll try that. Now can you see?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can. Thank you.
Okay, good. And I sized it so that people would be on the side and not on top of Photoshop. So, anyways, this is a girl I've known since she was born, and she got married last year. So what I want to do is show you how to add texture to this image and how the blending modes work. So there's all sorts of places online you can find textures for free, or you can go out and just take pictures of concrete or pictures of old paint or pictures of, you know, wood, and there's all sorts of different things that make good textures. Rust, old rust, and you just, you know, sharpen them up a little, desaturate them, and you have really nice texture. So it's really easy to find textures, and okay, so I'll close this and start over here. Okay, so did you see how I brought the picture into Photoshop? I just went to File, Open, and found the picture and opened it. If it was a raw picture, it would go into Camera Raw first, but these are all reduced size JPEGs so that my computer wouldn't freak out. Because I don't know how much it can do at a time. So when I want to get a texture, I would do the same thing. It's just a file. So I'm going to go to File, Open. I'm going to get my texture, and it comes right into Photoshop. It's up. It has its own little tab at the top, at least how mine is set up. And but it's the opposite. It's the wrong orientation. So I need to go to Image, Image Rotation, and turn it 90 degrees clockwise, so that I can use it as a texture on the portrait style photo that I have. In order to get this texture onto the other picture, I go over to my left, and at the very top is Move Tool. And if I click on that, then I can click on this image, drag it up to that tab, and when it appears, I just drag it back down onto that image. And now it's on top over in the layer panel over here. You can see that it's on top of this background layer. Now, I'm going to, if you hit Control-0, it shows everything that's in your screen. Now this is how big that picture was compared to my JPEG. So I'm going to shrink it way down, just grabbing the corners and just shrinking it on down here. And if you hold Shift, you can grab the center and just drag it down a little so that it's more the shape of the actual image. For textures, it doesn't matter if they get distorted. It's not a big deal. So now I'm going to hit Control-0 again to fit it back to my screen. Now my picture is under there. If I lower the opacity over here on the right, above the layers, there's an opacity button here. I can make the opacity different, but I mean, you don't really want that as your texture. You want a different look, and that's where blend modes come in. Blend modes are found right here, right at the top of the layers panel, and this one is normal right now. And these are all the different blend modes. When you pass your cursor over the top of it, it'll show you what it looks like. And so if you pass over each of them, you're going to find one that looks better than the others. That one looks kind of nice, but it really lines things up too much. So I think out of all of these, soft light is the best. You can kind of see it up in the sky more, and if you look in close on the ground, you can see. If I hit Control plus, you can zoom in, and if you hold down your space bar, you can use your cursor to move around the image by holding down your space bar. Look around, and I kind of like what that does to the sky. It kind of messes up her arms, but we'll worry about that in a minute because that's another thing I'm going to teach you. So I'm going to do Control minus, or I can do Control 0 and it'll fit it to the screen again. Now things are kind of dark with the tree and stuff, so I'm going to add another texture to try and lighten some of that up. So I'm going to go over here to File again. Oh, get out of here. Go to File, Open, and I'm going to use this soft gray texture this time. Again, I'm going to rotate it by going to Image, Image Rotation, 90 degrees clockwise. And I'm still in the Move tool, so I can grab it by clicking on the image, move up to my original image, and drag it back down, let go, and it shows up again. If I hit Control 0, again, it fits it out to the full screen, and I can handlebar it in here, the corners, and then Control 0 again to make it back to full screen. And I'm going to try soft light right away because it might work equally well. If you want to see what it looks like without the layer, you can click on the little eye that's beside each layer and it will turn the layer off. If the eye is not lit up, the layer is not on. When the eye, you can see the eye, you can see the layer. So that really brightened the bottom part of the scene back up again. So I kind of like that. This layer looks nice where it is. Now, so that's how blend modes work. It's how the layer above interacts with the layers underneath. Now, if I turn off this middle layer, this gray layer is going to react differently with the bottom layer because that middle layer won't be there. See, now all of a sudden everything is a lot brighter because the only thing interacting with the bottom layer is that layer 2, the top texture layer. So that's how textures work. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay.
That was so cool.
Good. It's very simple and you can try different things. The next thing we're going to talk about is layer masks because that is what I would do next in the normal flow of dealing with these. And so I'm going to go back to PowerPoint for a second. And layer masks hide or show the content of each. Can you see this? Can you see it? Or no? Okay. Why would it do that?
May need to unshare first and then share again.
Yeah, I'm trying here. There we go. That's not how it should work. But whatever. We're making it work. This is my first webinar, so you'll have to forgive me. So layer mask hide or show, you can see it now, right? The contents of each layer. The white layer mask, and I'll show you what they look like when we get to Photoshop. The white layer mask shows what is in the layer. So if the layer mask is entirely white, the entire layer is showing. And there's also black layer masks, and that hides everything that's in the layer. So whatever is black in your layer is hidden. So when you use a white brush on a black layer, it's like poking holes in it so you can start to see what's underneath. But if it's a white layer, everything is there. And it's like you're painting paint on a window so that you can't see through it anymore. That's what the black, if you have a white layer mask and you paint with black on it, that's what is happening. You're hiding things with the black. So to see the actual layer mask by itself, you can hit Alt and click on the layer mask and you'll just see the layer mask, which is kind of good, fun sometimes to make sure you hit everything you wanted to hide and that sort of thing. And if you want to copy the layer mask to a different layer, you can Alt and you hit Alt and then drag the layer mask to the layer that you want it on. And I'll show you how to do that with this. Okay, here, and I'm resharing. And we're back. Okay. However it's going to work, it's going to work. So on these textures, a lot of people do not appreciate having their skin have weird textures on it. So if you look closely on her skin, it's very pixelated because it's a small size picture. But you can kind of see there's like some of the texturing is on her skin and not creating the best look. So I'm going to put a layer mask on each of these textures and remove it from the areas that we don't want. So I'm going to do Control 0 to fit it back to screen. I'm going to go over to this charcoaly layer, and I'm going to add a layer mask by going down to the bottom, clicking on this little icon here, the rectangle with the circle is your layer mask. So when there's a little white square beside your layer, that is your layer mask. This one is white. That means what? Everything is showing. White reveals, as they say. And so if I want to get rid of some of the texture on her arms, I need to pick up my brush tool, which is over here on the left, and click on that, and then make sure I have a black brush, and that is down in the bottom left, this little area here, and click on black. And then I'm going to reduce my brush size by using the left bracket key. And I'm going to paint. I'm going to do at 50% opacity because if it's too high, I might get rid of some of it on something I don't want while I'm doing everything. And so this just allows me, when you're doing this sort of thing, usually I work around 30, but because I'm trying to, rush things a little, I'm going to use a higher, maybe I'll just do it at 100, and we'll just see what happens. So I'm going to rub it off her arm, and see how her arm is getting all of the darkness from that mask is going away. Maybe I'll do her whole dress. And this is very rough. I'm going to increase the brush size by using the right bracket key. I'll get in here and color this real quick. I'll do it on her hat. So now she's all lit up and looking good. And if you look over here on the left, the layer mask now has this black marks in it. If I hold my Alt key and click on that, that's what the layer mask looks like. And see, there's areas there I didn't get. So I can go straight over here and I can color those in, even while it's just this part. And then when I click Alt and click on it again, everything goes back to normal. Now, I could make a new layer mask for up here on the second texture and recolor that all in, or I'll get rid of that by throwing it in the trash can. Or I can just copy this one that I've already painted to this layer. And you do that by holding Alt and dragging it up to this layer. And now it has the same layer mask on both layers. So it just it cuts your work in half. And this happens a lot if you have like adjustment layers or textures, things like that, that you are working on a certain area that you want to make adjustments to, but not the whole picture as a whole. It's very easy to just use the same layer mask so it hits the same areas. And that's how layer masks work. Are there any questions about layer masks? Okay, I'll show you something else. If I hit Control-I, it will invert the layer mask. So if I have the layer mask selected, see over here I have the gray selected, and there's the little white corners. If I click over here, then this is selected. So with the layer mask selected, what was I doing again? Oh, I was going to invert. Control-I inverts it. So it makes the only thing that's being affected is what is painted white, and everything else is hidden. So I'm going to hit Control-I again because that's not the look I was going for, but Control-I does that.
Quick question, Kathy.
Yes.
This is called blending with layer modes? I've never seen it. I think it's
No.
fantastic. What's it called?
These are layer masks.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can attach them to any layer to hide or reveal parts of that layer.
Okay.
So that the whole layer isn't showing.
Right.
It's very useful when you want to just change certain parts of an image.
No, I can see that.
You would use a layer mask to do that.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And
Thank you.
it's non-destructive, so you don't have to worry about, like you could go back and say maybe later I decide, you know, that Joshua tree is really kind of on the light side. Maybe you want to darken it up a bit. You can go back in, and if you see on this top layer, I'm drawing in more darkness on the Joshua tree now because I decided maybe I wanted it a little darker. And Control-Z is your friend. It is go back a step. That is my favorite undo. Control-Z is your friend. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. And we are here. Are we back to the PowerPoint? Okay, can you see curves and levels, adjustment layers? Okay.
Yes.
So adjustment layers are wonderful. They are Photoshop's way of allowing you to make all sorts of adjustments to your image without doing anything destructive. They each are their own layer. They have a layer mask attached, and they do all sorts of things. I'm going to show you what 3 different kinds of them do. This number 4 here is curves and levels, and those are 2 of the different adjustment layers. These adjustment layers both work on your black and white points and your contrast levels. And I put in here about clipping masks that you can use to attach your adjustment layer to just the layer right below it, which is sometimes you have a color texture that you want to be in black and white because you don't like the color. By attaching a black and white adjustment layer to the layer below, to that texture, you are turning just that texture black and white, and you can use it. Or, you know, if you don't have the black and white adjustment layer clipped, it will affect everything below it, including the background layer. So adjustment layers are very versatile. You can do all sorts of things with them, and it's a good thing to work on. But I'm just going to show you 3 of them tonight. They let you make the targeted adjustments, like I said, because each of them has that layer mask. So you can make specific adjustments by using those layer masks. You can use them to adjust colors because each of them have a color channels, the red, green, and blue color channels that you can adjust. And they're just something great to work on learning. And so I'm going to go back to Photoshop, and I'm sharing my Photoshop. I won't say what I'm doing once I get this down, but we're back to Photoshop, right? Okay. So we're going to use the levels adjustment layer first. I'm going to show you what it does. And all your adjustment layers are down here on this little icon in the bottom right, this little circle. If you click on it, these are all your different sorts of adjustment layers that you can use. You can also find them up here, a new adjustment layer, and they're right here as well. Most of the time though, I just use this little icon because it's easier. First we're going to do levels. Well, that's this one here. And see what it does? It just adds it right here on top of all of the other layers. And it has its own layer mask included. And what it does is, this is the levels area here on the right, and this little point here on the left adjusts your black point. The more you move it to the right, the more of your pixels are going to turn black. You can see that on the image. If you use the opposite, this is your white point. The lower you put it, the more things are going to turn white. So the center one, it obviously is doing like all those pixels that are at the 50% in between white and black. And when you move it to the left, things lighten up because you're lowering the white point. When you move it to the right, they get darker because you're darkening all those pixels below it. This is helpful. Like say I wasn't happy with how the Joshua tree looked and I wanted to lighten it up a bit. So maybe I like it there. I can go to my adjustment layer, or to my layer mask on my levels. Now that I like the way those Joshua tree looks, I'm going to Control-I, invert my layer mask. Then I can come back in and paint with white. You can change your brush color. I have my brush still selected. You can change your brush color by either using these little arrows over here on the left, right by the colors. And if you click on it, it switches. Or you could use the shortcut X, and X does the same thing. It moves them back and forth. So I want my brush to be white. So white is the foreground color now. So when I paint on the trees, it's going to lighten up. Why isn't it working right? Okay. So it's lightening up those branches just enough so you can see more of the detail in them. I'm doing a real rough thing here, but you can kind of see, maybe I want that bush brightened up. So if I click on the little eye, you can see what I did. It's a little darker, it's a little lighter. You can use this to bring out highlights in scene or for any number of reasons. And that's how levels work. Up here, right now, you are in the RGB channel. There's also a red channel, a green channel, and a blue channel. And you can do a little bit of color toning by, if you click on the red channel, if you go to the right, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to get redder or greener, because red and green are opposite on the color wheel. Or you can, see, because right now only the tree is highlighted, so maybe I want a little different color in the Joshua tree. You can adjust certain things just by moving your levels. Okay, so something that I did earlier and was kind of fun, I'm gonna make another levels. It's for fun. And on this one, oh no, it wasn't. Never mind, I'm not gonna do that. We'll get really down a rabbit trail. Okay, we only have so much time. So that's levels. Curves is also an adjustment layer. And you've all seen curves in Lightroom and are probably familiar with it from Matt. You can click auto and see what Photoshop will find your white and black points automatically and put those into your scene. So this is before and this is after. So it doesn't like the out of contrast I put in the image, but I do. So so there. So to get rid of points on a curve, you have to drag them down and they'll disappear. So now if I click on the curve and I drag it down in the darker area just a little, I can darken my darks and whiten my whites just a bit. I don't really need the whites whitened too much. But curves work to help increase contrast. They also have the same channels, red, green, and blue. They work best. Sometimes you'll go out and take pictures like in the smoke or in the fog, and you want more detail than you're getting. Curves and levels really help to optimize that and bring in more contrast to images that need it. Sometimes things are just hazy from dust or whatever, and you need to add that bit of more contrast, and that's what these two different adjustment layers are really good for. You could make it a little bluer, which is kind of a fun thing. Now on each of these, you also have the option of lowering your opacity. So there are many ways of getting the certain effect that you're looking for. So both curves and levels work with your white and black points and the contrast in between to accomplish whatever goal you're working for. The next curve adjustment layer is the next adjustment layer I'm going to show you is converting to black and white. It's very similar to working in Lightroom. It's very much the same, and you just go down to the bottom and click on black and white, and now there's a black and white adjustment layer at the top, and you have all the same sliders that you do in Lightroom to adjust your various colors and bring them down or bring them up. I kind of wish that the blue was darker in this image, so I can come up here and I can bring down the blues so that they kind of show up a little more. And the cyans also the same. There's also yellow in her roses and in some of the desert scenery that might look nicer if it was lighter. So you can raise, and these adjust only that particular color. So you have complete control over what your final black and white product looks like. It's much better than desaturating because this gives you so much more control. If you raise up the reds or lower them, it affects everything. So this is before, this is after. Another cool thing is that very popular right now are like lowly saturated images. If I bring down the opacity just the tiniest bit, then you have this really low opacity colored image that's very popular right now. You can bring it down as much as you want, or middle of the road it. It's a lot of fun. Now one more thing in the black and white that I haven't shown you yet is that up here at the top there's this tint button, and if you use the tint, it turns it into sepia. And you can pick the color that you want to have as your base color. So maybe you think that's a little too yellow. Maybe you want it to be almost black and white, but not quite. You can adjust that. Or you can go cyan and have a cyan colored image. It's a lot of fun. And then when you do that, again, I'm going to go to the blue again because that was kind of fun. Okay. Then you can lower that opacity down and have sort of a blue faded image, which is also really popular. So there's a lot of fun things that you can do with the black and white adjustment layer, and it's very helpful and gives you a lot of different effects that it's just one layer there that you're playing with. If you change it to soft light, it helps you with contrast as well. And you can, like if you want your flowers lighter, you can use the sliders in your color image by putting it on soft light to raise and lower that particular color. So that's just one. I didn't write that in my notes or anything. So extra tidbit. So next on our list, I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. Are we back to the PowerPoint? I'm assuming we are. Oh, I forgot. See, here we go. That was black and white. Selections. We all hate selections or love them, depending on how experienced we are with them, but they are really helpful. It's one of the first things I worked on learning in Photoshop, and then they made it easier. So that was so nice of them to do after I learned. But every time they improve the algorithm for selecting, the better it is for everyone.
Is it just me?
No, it looks like Kathy froze.
If she starts singing "Let It Go," we'll know what happened.
I get the froze joke. She's coming back. I think she's coming back.
Yeah, she knows it.
This is really helpful. I'm learning so much. I'm really appreciating this.
You're not wrong. This is really good.
Yep.
There you are.
I think you're still muted, Kathy.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to do it without my microphone. Can I hear you?
Yeah, can hear you fine.
Hang on. Let me go to my. I'm going to go to my settings and change my audio. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I can hear you now. Woohoo! Okay. I saw myself just sitting there and, you know. So where did I cut out?
I have the 6 selections, everyone's favorite, and you were going through auto select.
Okay, so
Okay.
so I just was starting that. Okay, good. Okay, so let me share my screen and we'll go from there. Yeah, backwards. Okay, so 6 selections. I am here. And I was talking about how Photoshop had improved the process a lot lately. You can auto select and it does a really good job. And then you can refine your selections, or you can use quick selection, which is also really effective, and then refine your selection. There's other ways with channels and things, but we're not, that's more advanced. So then once you make your selection, we put it onto the layers as either a selection or a new layer with a layer mask, depending on what you're going to do with it. So let's go to Photoshop, and I will, is that working? Is it on Photoshop again?
Yes.
Okay. Let me, for this one, we're going to do one that's easier. Oh, where's my Photoshop? Why am I not seeing I'm not seeing it on my screen. Can you guys see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
I can't see it. All right, where am I at here? Hang on. Okay. You can still see it, right? This is horrible. Okay, moving on to selections. I'm going to close these textures so we don't have to worry about them anymore. And I'm going to bring up a different photo. And we're going to select her. What you'll do is you go to your selection tool, and that is this tool here on the left, quick selection. And once you've selected it, go up to the top, and there's a little icon there that says select subject. If you click on that, you know what it does? It selects your subject. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see the little ants crawling around. Yeah? Okay, so it auto selects, and if you look, oops, undo that. I'm going to hold down my space bar to move my image around. You can see it did a pretty good job of selecting everywhere where I would want. It messed up a little on her hair because it's very close to the background color. But overall, it did an excellent job of getting everything. So at this point, what you want to do is click on the little icon beside that that says select and mask. And this is where you're going to refine your subject. And this on the left-hand side at the top are your little tools that you're going to use to do that. There's the brush tool, which works just like a regular brush. And above that is the Refine Edge brush tool, which helps your selection interact with its surroundings and more define the selection. So we're going to click on that and use that Refine Edge tool to get everything clearer. Before we do that, I'm going to come over to the right, and I always like to give it a little help in the selecting process. Smart Radius helps it define better where where your selections are, and so you have to pick how many pixels you want it to be deciding between. So I'm going to pick 2. I always put smooth at like 1 because I'm sure there should be some smoothing. If you're doing any sort of composite work, having a really hard edge on a non-hard subject doesn't work very well. If it's like a hard metal box that's perfectly in focus, then you don't need to feather your selection. If it's a person, you should always have a little bit of feathering because it just makes it seem more realistic. Most things don't have a super sharp edge. So I always add in a little under a pixel of feathering. And I boost the contrast a little because it does help Photoshop pick the selection better. So now that I've done that on this side, I can come over here and I'm going to put this on overlay mode so we can see where the selection is. And anything that's red is not selected. So I'm going to make my brush bigger by clicking on the right.
Kathy, how did you put it into overlay mode?
Okay, at the top here, there's view mode. Can you see that? And you have choices of onion skin, marching ants, overlay, and you can pick the color of overlay on black, on white, just black and white, or on layers. So I picked the overlay mode, and that's up here at the top. Once you're in that, then you can come in and use your Refine Edge tool. Well, first I'm going to use the brush tool because there's some areas that it just did not get, and I want it to know. It's an ever-learning process. Like the more that you brush on an edge, the more it knows you want that edge selected that way. So I'm going to come down here and do on her foot, up on her hair. There's some areas here that it just did not do properly. So I'm kind of more refining where I want that to do its selecting. And everything else was pretty good. Down here on the bottom, there's a little bit of, oop, that was overkill. So you can see my circle has a plus in it. If I hit the Alt button and hold it down, it turns it into the opposite. So now if I come down here, if it's showing the negative sign, it's going to unselect that part. So I had made a mistake down there. So if I have the Alt key held down, it changes whether it's going to select or deselect. So now I go back to the Refine Edge tool, and I'm going to go along. I won't go along all the edges. I'll just go along some of them to let it know I want it to be refining these edges a little more. It's really good at doing tool. It goes in there and gets all the little tiny holes in the tool and makes it look more transparent, which is very cool. With my daughter being in dance for so long, I took a lot of dance pictures, and so it was fun to know that you could get that transparency. Holding down my space bar to move around the image. And you just go along the edge, and it's just further refining what it did based on the parameters that you did on this right-hand side. You can see where it went up between her fingers there and under her arm a little better. And once you've done that, it's kind of fun to go up to your view mode and put it into black and white, and you can kind of see where it's missing or where it did a good job. You can see how the tool is a little bit transparent. When you're in here, I like to go to the brush. Sometimes there are areas that you know should be selected and just aren't. So you can go in and just kind of modify that to make sure that it's all taken care of. Down here, make this a little smaller with the left bracket key. And I'm going to do Control plus to zoom way in here and get rid of this little piece. Alt makes it negative, so I can get rid of that little selection part there. And I'm going to go back to the regular view mode now and Control 0. Oh, wait, let me get out of that. Then do Control 0. And now it's not like perfect, but it's a good enough selection. So we can output, now we can either do to selection, and it will just make a selection on top of the picture. Or if you click on that, you can do, my favorites are either selection or new layer with layer mask. And I often do new layer with layer mask because sometimes I'll get it into the image and I'll realize something's missing, or it took too much of something, or there's not enough of something. And I like to be able to fix the mask after it's been selected. And doing the new layer with layer mask allows you to do that. And I'll show you how. So it brought it back into Photoshop with all of, you know, just the, it basically, it turns off the background. So you're left with just that picture. So if you wanted, you could throw in a layer underneath it of any other color. Let's just like do a fill layer of some color. Pick a solid color. Okay. And maybe we want it to be pink. I don't know. And if we click on that layer and drag it below the layer of the selection, then now it's on the, now you have a background with the selected image on top. And then if you notice, you can come in here, now that it's on a lighter color, you can see areas that you wish weren't selected. So you can go to the layer mask, click on it, and make sure you're with black because you want to deselect it. And you can, you make sure you're in brush mode. And you can come in here and you can erase that part of the selection that you don't like. This is a little messy down here. So if you do layer with layer mask, you have these options of being able to go back in and fix things. And underneath this layer mask, the whole picture is there. So it's very non-destructive and allows you to really have control over everything that's happening. So that's how selections work. You can spend forever learning more about how to do them and how to do hair and all of those things. And it's a process, but this is just, you know, a couple minutes here of doing selecting, and you have basically a composite. This could have been, you know, a forest that she's in or whatever, you know, and it's just, it was that easy to get her moved into this. Do you guys have any questions on selections? Okay, I'm gonna go back to my PowerPoint and moving on to spot healing. Spot healing is super helpful for portraits, for landscapes, for all sorts of different things. Not if you're doing nature and you're going to enter it in competition. Nature doesn't let you do spot healing or cloning or any of those things because you're moving pixels around and they don't like that. But for any other PID or creative or any of the reality-based competitions, the spot healing is your friend and cloning is your friend. So I'm going to go through how these work, and hopefully you'll get some ideas on how they work. Always do it on its own blank layer, like Dawn was talking about. Check sample all layers and content aware, and it will pick from the layers underneath what it draws on that blank layer. You can pick the mode if you want to lighten it, darken it, or normal, depending on what you're removing. If you have a bunch of white hairs that are sticking out with a dark background of a portrait and you want to remove those, if you use dark, it's just going to darken just the pixels of the hair. It's not going to darken that whole area, and so it's it allows you to be more precise in the pixels that are being moved, and messes up less. That's what I to say it does, because it can like pick weird pixels from somewhere sometimes. Spot healing works best for small areas like telephone wires or pimples on the face, things like that. And because it chooses from the surrounding pixels automatically. The healing brush, you can do a little bigger of an area because you pick the pixel source and then paint over the area that you're going to cover. And you, every 2 or 3 clicks, you want to be changing the source of your pixels so that they will match the best with the surroundings that you're removing the object from. So I'm going to go into Photoshop again. And I am going to open, let's see. I'm going to open this one. This is my kitten, Cedric. He's almost a year old now. Speaking of cats, right, Andrew?
I've always got company.
So that's right, me too. Normally when I'm doing this, I have a cat sitting out here. So you're fortunate you haven't seen a tail go across the screen. This is when we first got him last January. And he is a cutie. But if you look at the image, there's these little hairs down here in the carpeting because I have 3 cats and 2 dogs, and there is never no hair on the carpeting, no matter how much I vacuum. So we want to get rid of those because they don't help the image at all. So what I would do is first I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call it, I'll just call it spot healing for now. And when you're doing this, this is when it's helpful to know what's happening on which layer, because otherwise by the 4th layer of whatever you're doing, you're like, which layer was that on again? So I'm going to go over on my left side and go to the spot healing tool. That looks like a Band-Aid because you're fixing something. And now you have this little circle, and this is your spot healing brush. Up at the top of your screen, there's over on your left, sort of. Okay, first I'm going to make sure that my brush is 100% hardness. Now, that seems counterintuitive, but because it's only choosing certain pixels to change, it's okay to have it hard. It won't show up really bad. So I try and make sure that it is 100% hardness for spot healing and healing. Then I make sure, right on this, we're going to be darkening these pixels. So I'm going to put it on the darken mode. And then we make sure it's in content aware so that it's sampling the surrounding pixels to see what color it should make. You also want to make sure it's sampling all layers. Make sure that is checked because it's going to be sampling the layer underneath it. So now I can do Control ++ in. We're going to, I'm holding down the space bar to move. We're going to go over here to these pixels. They don't have to be quite that big. And I can just brush over them and they disappear. And it's just, the only pixels it's affecting are the ones that are light. And here's the before, and here's the after. That was super quick, and it makes a nice big difference to the overall cleanness of the image. Now, you can use, I think I'm going to show you the healing brush on a different image. So that's for spot healing. Now, up here, there's other little things. Let's see. Okay, so basically, that's all how spot healing works. You could come in and, you know, if you wanted to get rid of his whiskers, you could, but I don't want to do that. So we're going to go to a different image to do more healing because it needs it more. I just wanted to show you my kitten. So I'm going to open up this picture. This is up in Beatty. Beatty? No. What's the ghost town up in Death Valley? Is that Beatty? Anyways, this is the old post office there in the ghost town. But it has like a fence all the way around it. It had all these power lines coming through, kind of making it very messy to be an old-fashioned sort of picture. So you can come in. I'm going to make a new layer by clicking on this new layer icon down here at the bottom. And it makes a new layer above the old one. And I can use the spot healing brush to try and get rid of this power line. Now, it may not work because for some reason blue sky often doesn't work the best, but we're going to try. So I'm on my new layer. It's blank. I have sample all layers, content aware. I don't want it on darken this time, do I? I'm going to put it on lighten might work. We'll try it and see. That's what the Control Z is for, right? Undo, undo. So I'm going to click here. Now if you hold down your Shift key, you can go to the other end of something that's reasonably straight and click there, and it makes a straight line all the way across. Now you can tell that didn't work too well. So let's try something different. Control Z brings it all back. Let's try the healing brush. Now on this one, I have to choose the source of my pixels. So I'm going to pick from right underneath. I click the Alt key, and I'm going to click right below the power line. Now, when I go up on the power line, you can see it's just blue. It is showing me what it's going to cover. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to hold my Shift key down and come over here and see. Ooh, that totally didn't work. Control Z. Okay, So we may not be able to use the shift key for this one. So I'm going to click Alt to select my point. Come up here. I'm going to click a few times. Then I'm going to click again and select a new area to get pixels from. Come up a little more. Come up a little more. Click again. Alt, 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 click, Alt, click, Alt, click. And it's gone. Before and after. And you can't even tell. And you can do that to all these power lines here the exact same way. The spot healing brush might work on these because they're smaller and thinner. Hang on. We don't want to get too close in. But you can see these power lines. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller and just come in and just do little sections and see if we can get some of these power lines gone that are just messing the whole picture up. Now it could take a while to do all this, but earlier I did one and it did a really nice job of getting rid of everything. So for some of this you could use the clone stamp. It's for what the clone stamp does, and I'll go back over here. Your clone stamp is used to remove bigger items. You can choose the source and clone to your selected area. You can also add in, like say you have a building and one of the windows is really covered by a sign or a pole, and so you want to remove that. You can copy a window from one part of the wall to the other part of the wall, and you never know. It's a lot of fun working and doing that. And it's also really helpful in retouching portraits for softening wrinkles and things like that. Because you select the area you're pulling from, you can lighten dark areas, dark and light areas, to just make the face more appealing. And so I'm going to show you a bit of what the, where did I go? The clone stamp, and I'll show it in here. So let's say I want to get rid of some of these shadows. I'm going to stay on this layer. I'll call it removal, spot removal. I'm going to click on the clone stamp and I'll show you what it does. What should I do? Okay, we'll get rid of this post over here. I can use my Alt key to select. Now, for those of you using Macs, Alt is Option and Control is Command. So I'm working on a Windows computer, so I use Alt and Control, but you would use Option and Command. So I click Alt and click on my point that I want to work from, and I can slide up and down. And the clone stamp, the point that it picks from, moves at the same distance from what you're painting. So I can come here and just bring that over a little and cover that over, and then I can come here and just draw straight down. Oh, I'm just moving the pole to the right. Let's try again. I'm going to come over here And I will come back and we can go down and just draw it out. And then you see there's some duplication. Then you have to go back in and kind of fix that so it doesn't look like you cloned something in, because that's never a good look. And then there you go. That post is all gone. And it looks pretty good. There's a little bit of duplication there. I always try and really look at my cloning areas to make sure there's not an issue. Okay, let's see, where else can we do that? We can get rid of some of these shade. We'll just work, have fun and get rid of the shade. We don't want to have two rocks. Oh. I'm just moving my shade. But anyways, you get the idea that you can just go in there and change the whole look of an image by removing bits and pieces that aren't aesthetically pleasing, as I like to put it. I want my pictures to be clean and well put together, and this way it is. You can see that you can get rid of these shades. You could, in the one I was practicing on, I got rid of all these poles and all the lines and everything, and over here this pole, this fencing, and then you have a nice clean image to work from. And clone stamp works good for removing larger things. One other way to remove things is the lasso tool, and let me open a picture for that. You would use that when there's a nice image, but there's just one, like someone walked through your beach image and you want to get rid of that person, or there's a large piece of something that is just isolated and you want to get rid of it. The lasso tool is a really nice way to do that. I'm going to make a new, here, let me bring this one up. So this is out in Death Valley, and these two people, I took the picture with them in it because I liked them being in it, because it shows how big that area is with the little people in there. But for the purposes of our demonstration, I'm going to get rid of them. So to do that, I'm going to use the lasso tool. And the lasso tool has to work on a layer that has pixels. So it won't work on a blank layer. So I have to do it on this layer. Now I can use Control-J to make a copy of my background layer so that I'm not doing anything to my background layer. So Control-J copies the layer that you are on. So I'm going to come over here, and I have selected the lasso tool here on the left, and I'm going to draw around these people and their shadow, because leaving a shadow when there's no people would be weird. And I'm going to use some of this in-between space to just give Photoshop more to work with. So now they're highlighted. If I come up, now we're going to use content-aware fill to fill this selection. And Photoshop is pretty good at doing a great job of getting rid of things like this. It is quite, they have perfected it really well. So if I go to Edit, and I go to Content-Aware Fill, it says, okay, you selected these people, is this okay? And this is what it's going to do. There's no people, it looks pretty good to me. You can zoom in and see where they were. It's not bad. So if you like what it's doing, you can say output to new layer. And now you did it non-destructively because it put itself on a blank layer. And to get rid of the selection on your initial layer, you hit Control D and it deselects whatever is there. So that is your image without the people. If I turn that off, there are the people, there they're not. It's obviously not perfect, but I can come in on this one and I can use a layer mask to come in really close and add in some of that detail that's missing. Make my brush small, just come on in, and when it gets to the dark part, I can come back in and fix that. So I can get as much of the detail as possible back into the image, and it did a great job. So those are 4 different ways of removing things out of an image. Where are we at? 7:30. Are you guys bored yet? Is your brains mush?
Oh, we could go all
I have
night.
2 more. I have 1 more. Okay, good. Let me
Not
take a
bored
drink.
yet.
Good. That's the point. So next I'm going to do dodge and burn, and I'm going to go back to my kitty picture to do that. Let me go to my PowerPoint. And the lasso tool we did. Dodge and burn, that's making, dodge is making areas lighter and burn is making areas darker. And you can use it to great effect in landscapes and portraits. Pretty much most pictures benefit from some specific dodging and burning to bring out certain areas and to de-emphasize certain areas. And this is a great way to do it non-destructively, and using your brush, you have a lot more control. So again, you want to use a new layer, only this time it's different. You're going to use a 50% gray layer, and I'll show you how to make that. And you can use a brush with white or black, or the dodge and burn tools. They work the same on that gray layer, and so it's your choice which you prefer. Lower the opacity of your brush to 2 to 3% so that you are gradually adding in the effect. If you do 50%, all of a sudden it's gonna be really dark and you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, what'd I do? But if you do 2 to 3, you can just brush over again, and just kind of gradually build up the amount of darkness or lightness that you want. And again, you can use a layer mask to only keep the effect where you want it. And I'll show you quickly how that works. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop, and I have that more down now. I'm going to find my kitten, because we're going to do it on him. And there's a lot of lightness around him that kind of pulls your eye away from him. So we're going to make a layer of dodging and burning to help with that problem. So to do that, go to Layer up at the top right and go to New, which layer? New Layer, just New Layer. And then New Layer, and it's little whatever it's called, box is going to show up here, and you want to make it be an overlay. Once you click the mode as overlay, it will ask if you want it to fill with 50% gray. Click that, and you'll get a 50% gray layer in overlay blend mode on the top of the kitten. Now, did you see anything change? No, because in overlay, 50% gray is indivisible. You can't see it. But when you start painting white and black on it, it lightens it or darkens it to where it starts to affect the underneath image. So I'm going to use the brush tool, and I'm going to paint with black on some of this carpeting here to get it darker. My opacity right now is at 100%. I do not want it up there. I'm not going to do 2 to 3 because it'll take forever, but maybe I'll do like 10 because you'll be able to see. I'm going to make my brush bigger by using the right bracket key, and I'm making sure my brush is soft. 0% hardness, because I want the edges of what I'm brushing on to be very soft. So now, let me make sure he's all in there. Now, when I come in, you can start to see the effect that I'm getting by adding in this darkness. And you just take some, because it's a big area, I'm taking some big strokes. And it's still pretty bright, but the outer edges have now darkened up enough that you're not really noticing them nearly as much as you did before. Now, if you just look at just the layer, I'm going to click on Alt and click on that layer and click on this eye, and you can see what I did, the black. I'm going to Alt and click on the eye again, and everything shows back up. So I'm going to add a little more over here to just kind of darken things down just a little more. So he is highlighted. If it gets too dark, you can always lower the opacity of your layer. But I'm just trying to show how you can accentuate your subject more by using light and dark. So on him, I'm going to add a little bit of white. So I'm going to click X, and that switches my foreground and background colors over here. X, so my brush is going to be painting white now. And I'm going to make my brush a little smaller. I'm going to lighten up his eye just a little. A couple of clicks. I'm going to lighten this dark area over here some to just kind of bring out his texture of his fur, bring out his whiskers. Bring out his fur over here. Can you see the difference on his fur? You can see his face a lot nicer. And if you look at just the layer mask, or the layer with the dodging and burning, the black is burning, the white is dodging. And so we're just changing. And what's cool is if you decide, oh man, that was really bad, you can just turn everything to 50% gray again and start over. It's not like you burned on the actual image itself and you're stuck. So it's very helpful to have that non-destructive process. Little nose. So that's how dodging and burning works. You can also do it with the dodging and burning tools, and some people do it directly on the actual photo, but don't do that. It's because that is changing the actual pixels, and it can also affect the color. The color can turn, I don't know, it kind of gets harsher the more that you dodge and burn on something. So it's better to do it on another layer, because then all you're doing is lightening and darkening on top of those pixels. It doesn't change the color as much. So you have, before your eyes are really distracted by all the light around him, and afterwards your eyes just focus right in on him because all of that other light is not distracting anymore. Any questions on dodging and burning? So you did that by going to layer, new layer, and then just doing overlay mode with 50% gray, and then just drawing on it with white and black with the brush. And it's super easy, and it has a big impact on how an image looks. Okay, 10, my last one. Go here. I have some Photoshop shortcuts. When you're working in Photoshop, it's a pain to have to like go up, and some things don't have something you can press. You have to know the shortcuts. And there's billions of them, I feel like. I don't know them all. You don't really need to know them all, but there are some that are more important than others. And if you've noticed, while I've been working in Photoshop, I've been using several of them. And so we're going to go through them. To me, the most important one is first Control-Z, because I'm a mistake maker, or we'll call it an adventurer. What if this works? Nope. We'll call it an adventurer. That's better than a mistake maker. So Control-Z is really important because it takes you back a step. And you can keep going for a goodly amount of steps. I'm not sure what the limit is, but you can change what that limit is. But I've never, occasionally I'll reach that point, but usually I catch myself before that. Control-J copies the layer that is selected. So if you need to not use your background layer, but you have to do something that might be destructive, make a copy. And don't ever touch that background layer, because you may need it, and it won't be there for you. To view the layer, I did that several times. Alt and click on the icon of the layer that you want to see by itself, and then you can just do that again. Alt click to get back all of your layers. X switches between your foreground and background colors. And sometimes when you're playing with your brush, you may end up with not black and white. Maybe you've been painting with colors or whatever, adding more green into bushes or something. And so you want to get back to the black and white. That is D. D puts you back to your default foreground and background colors. Control-D removes a selection. Like when I had that lasso around the people, when you hit Control-D, that gets rid of any selection. The left bracket key decreases the size of your brush, and the right bracket key increases the size of your brush. There's another sliding thing that you can use too, but I did not include that. More Photoshop shortcuts. Shift Control Alt E. It seems like a lot, but it's just those three keys and E. Does stamp visible. If you're on the top layer, it basically copies everything from underneath into just one layer of what is seen. And then that's where you would do like a frame or color toning, things like that, where you can have everything all together in one layer. Some of the tools have their own little letter that will go directly to them. I put in here 4 of them. V is the move tool. C is the crop tool. I didn't do any cropping, but it's pretty simple. B is the brush tool, and S is the clone stamp tool. Those are the ones that I use a lot, and so it's helpful to know at least those ones. I used Control 0 a lot. When I zoom in and I want to fit it back to screen, Control 0 is what I use. Control G, I didn't talk about groups, but sometimes your layers are like, okay, I did the skin, and maybe you had a layer for pimples and a layer for eyes and a layer for lips. You can group those all together by selecting them the same way you would several files, by clicking on one and holding Shift and clicking on the bottom one that you want to select. So say you have 3 layers that you want to be in a group, you hit Control G and it'll make a group from those layers, and you can call that group face or whatever. And it's really helpful to kind of keep your layers organized. Control plus and minus, that zooms you in or out. And the tab key hides your panels that are on both sides, so you have more workspace. And it's really easy to just go back and forth. I did not do it because I wanted you to be able to see the layers, but sometimes you want to be able to have more workspace, and using the tab key gets rid of those side panels. And then when you hit it again, it brings them right back. What time is it? So I'm going to show you one last thing. So we'll go till 8. You can leave if you want, but I'm going to show you how to, one of the ways of many ways to make a frame. So, excuse me. This is my number 11. This is one way to add a frame. You use an image. Like if you have an image that's a background layer, you need to change it to layer 0 in order for this to work. And then you increase you go to image canvas size and increase your image to however big of a frame you want all around. Like if you want 50 pixels on each side, you would add 100 by 100 so that there would be 50 and 50, 50 and 50. And check relative, I'll show you this, to center it or have it the picture more towards the top so that you can have writing underneath if some people like to do that with their images. And then create a fill layer, fill it with a solid color, drag it below the image. I'll show you all this, so don't worry. And then you can choose your fill color with a dropper so that it matches the image. And then you can also add a stroke layer or a drop shadow effect, things like that. A lot of people wonder how to make a frame, and this is what I consider a pretty easy way to do it. So I'll show you. I'll show you with Cedric's picture here. Let me crop it down so that it's not quite so. So I hit the crop tool over here. I'm going to drag it in so that there's not quite so much extra stuff going on. Okay. I'm going to get rid of the crop pixels because for this I'm not going to save it, so it doesn't really matter. And for a frame, you kind of need to do that. So I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm on my top layer. I'm going to do Shift Control Alt and E. And what does that do? It makes a new layer on the top of everything that we did underneath. So now I have this layer that I can put a frame underneath, and everything is going to be there. I need to make sure that I do not have a layer labeled background. So if I go to my background layer and I'm going to right click, I'm going to change to layer from background and just click OK for normal and everything. So now instead of background it says layer 0, and that'll allow me to do what I want to do. So I'm going to come up here to this layer. I'm going first of all to change my canvas size. So I'm going to go to layer. Wait, is that right? Image, sorry. Image, canvas size, and change your measurement to pixels. And we'll do 100, just so it's a nice big frame. And we're going to keep him in the center. You could move it up so that then there would be room at the bottom for some writing or whatever, or at the top if you want to do writing at the top. But I'm going to do it at the center. And you can do right or left also. So I click OK. And now there's a blank layer around this of nothingness, which just means it's empty. My canvas is bigger than the actual picture. So now what I want to do to fill that is go to where am I at here? Oh yeah, sorry, my brain is getting tired. To layer, new fill layer, solid color. And you could do a pattern, I guess, if you wanted, but that's not going to make for a nice frame. So now we have, on the very top, we have this fill layer, and it's white. I'm going to drag it. I don't care what color it is right now. I'm going to drag it to below that other layer. So now all of those checkered pixels that were blank are now covered over with this white fill layer. Now I can click on this the color for the fill layer, and I can change it to any color I want. And I can even come over into the picture, and with a dropper I can pick a color that I want. Maybe I want it gray, maybe I want it teal. So once I like the color, I can click OK, and now I have a frame around my picture. It was very simple. You can add a drop layer or a drop shadow to the picture, and that'll show up down here by double clicking to the right, far right of your layer. And this is your effects screen. I'll move it over here so you can see. The very bottom is drop shadow. If you click that and then click on the words, this is the screen where you would make a drop shadow. If you notice, it already applied one. If you like the way it looks, you don't have to change anything. But you would change the opacity here. You can change how big it goes, how far out it goes, the size. You can change all those things. And then click OK when you're happy with it, and then you have a little bit of a 3D effect with your frame. We have 5 minutes left. If you want to add a stroke, make a blank layer on top. So you're here, go down and click on new layer, and now you have this new blank layer. And this is a stroke that you can remove very easily. So you go up to your marquee tool. This is your rectangle marquee tool over here on the top left, this little rectangle here. If you click on it and come to like about where you want the beginning of your stroke to start, and draw a rectangle around your picture just outside of it, that is on your blank layer. So now if you go to edit and to stroke, you can pick however wide of stroke you want. If you want it to be 10 pixels, maybe I want it to be black or grayish, who knows. Normal mode, 100%. Inside, I want it inside that line. And there you go. Now, the selection is still there, so what do? Control D gets rid of that. Then you have a stroke that's close around your picture and then a nicer frame around outside. And it's all removable. Like you're like, oh, I didn't like that stroke, or I want a different color. You can remove all of those things. So anyways, my gift to you, how to make a frame. Any questions or comments or criticisms?
That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome.
Ditto. Ditto. Very helpful. Really blew my mind. I appreciate it. I'm going to watch the video again.
I did record it, so
Thank
it
you.
will be posted on YouTube in the next couple days. I will make a point of that. It's not as hard as I thought it would be, so we're good.
Yeah, great job. Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome. Any questions?
Will there be more information on the fall colors trip that you alluded to earlier?
Yes, I'm going to be sending that to Lee tomorrow to post on the website, and it will get posted on our Facebook page as well, and there will be an email about all of that. If you are a member, then you're more than welcome to sign up. Did you become a member this year?
I think so. Like I can ask offline if you want to double check. If not, let me know and I can make it happen.
Well, I'll check our list. I have the list of everyone. So
I mean, if you've heard this, it's tough for us to run into each other, and I don't know what year I joined, and I don't even know what month it is right now.
yeah, I know it's September. Can you believe it? It's almost time for a fall color trip. Who knew in March that we would be here now? It's crazy. So crazy. But there's lots of, the more that you work with Photoshop, the easier it gets. I want to encourage any of you who are just like a bit overwhelmed by it. There's tons of stuff I don't know yet because, oh, see, you can see my cattail. And here's Tom. I'll show you my other cat. This is him there. He's laying beside me now. So I have 3 of those. You can see Cedric behind me. He's big now. Yeah, baby. Anyways, so now I have 2 cats hanging out. But yes, don't get discouraged and just keep working at it. There's Photoshop is notorious for having like 10 different ways to do everything. So you just have to find the way that clicks for you and use that. There's some ways I'm like, why would someone do it like that? When this way is so much better. But everyone has their own, quirks and personalities and ways that they like to do things. And it's good to get information because sometimes your way may not work, and having a different way to try is really helpful. Okay. Anything else? I will let you guys know when I post this. I'll put it on Facebook and in the email. Okay?
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Kathy, be well,
Stay
everybody.
safe. Good night.
Thanks for being here.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
The arrow's not working. Come on over.